Hey everybody, this is Dan,
And this is Ron.
and this is a nominee.
A nominee question. One day I'll maybe be able to pronounce it. A nominee questionable movies. Did I say it right that time?
Yeah, it sounded good to me.
Yay! Woohoo!
So today's questionable movie is In the Loop from 2009. It's a British produced comedy about politics, and particularly about something that I believe is supposed to be a very fictionalized representation of the run-up to the Iraq War.
Yep.
And it has James Gandolfini in one of those rare roles after The Sopranos ended, but before he died from eating too much. So,
Wait, what do you mean? What did he die of? I can't remember.
oh, he drank too much wine, ate too much food, and then dropped out of a heart attack in Italy at some point in 2012, I believe.
Okay, but then there were some a few people from a few people that appear in Veep that were regular in Veep. And you mentioned
Steve Coogan.
and Steve Coogan's in it. I never realized that was Steve Coogan before until you pointed it out.
Yeah, there's a lot of like people who I've seen in various places on television in the last 10 years, and I'm sure that because this is a movie spin-off of a British TV show, that makes sense.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, this is a spin-off of a show that ran, I believe, for 2 or 3 seasons called The Thick of It on BBC, which was basically it. I never saw any of it, but the best I understand it, it's pretty much just this in 30-minute chunks.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, like this movie gained some traction in the U.S., but nobody looked for the older sitcom, which is kind of interesting because like it. In terms of like British exports from that period, the other one that immediately comes to mind, of course, is Shaun of the Dead.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I feel like a lot of like things that kind of broke out from not having any kind of commercial potential in the U.S. to becoming fairly well-known films that were coming out of England in that period. I feel like a lot more people went back and looked for Spaced than The Thick of It because, like, you know, I'm like a TV junkie and I never saw any of The Thick of It. I mean, I'm guessing Thick of It is probably, it's just like a British Veep.
But you've seen Spaced.
I have seen Spaced all the way through.
Yeah.
Probably 2 or 3 times, yeah.
Which is the Simon Pegg TV show. Simon Pegg and what's the other guy's name?
Well, it's the whole Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, and then the guy who directed all the episodes is Edgar Wright, who's the guy who directed Shaun of the Dead, and later I can't remember if he ended up getting the director credit on Ant-Man, but he directed Scott Pilgrim.
No, I didn't realize that was the same guy.
Yeah, it was the same guy behind. That's why it's like Spaced, the like kind of the visual style of it is very uniform, despite the fact that it doesn't really look much like how sitcoms are shot generally. With this, I feel like this was a movie that was shot very much like a sitcom.
But like not the old school, what is it, 3-camera sitcom? Is that what it's called? It's the shaky
it's a single camera sitcom, but like by 2009 they kind of established all of the cinematic language of the single camera sitcom. And so you have, I mean, pretty much a single camera sitcom, it comes down to really like 3 kinds of shots at the end of the day. You got the reaction shot where you start wide and then you zoom in a little bit to bring attention to a detail or somebody's face. There's the kind of roller skate shot that was first done, I believe, at least on TV, or the kind of roller skates tracking shot on a like Larry Sanders show. Anytime anybody's like walking down a hallway talking, those tracking shots, it was always just a guy on roller skates because they didn't have, you know, they couldn't put like tracking rails throughout the entire set.
Right. Because that was filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Okay. No, I'm talking about like The Office, like
the Larry Sanders.
That's on, Larry Sanders.
Yeah, you said Larry Sanders. I was thinking of
it's Gary Shandling's show is
very different.
Yeah.
Right. But so this, I kept saying to you during the movie, I was like, oh, it's Office. Oh, it's The Office. Oh, it's Veep. Oh, it's The Office. Oh, it's Veep. And it helped that it had several other people from Veep, but it did feel like a cross between the two.
Yeah, and I think like the single camera sitcom, it got codified very quickly, and I think and that's just like one of the dominant sitcom forms. And I mean, that's probably more prevalent than three camera sitcoms at this point, although there are still a decent number of like traditional quote unquote three camera sitcoms out there.
But yeah, even the sort of the regular lineup, or the few shows I watched actually when I was watching TV on I think was it all ABC shows? I can't remember. But none of them were three camera. They're all sitcoms, and they're all single camera.
Yeah, I mean, the only three camera sitcom I can think of that was still on was like Big Bang Theory is a three camera sitcom.
Okay.
That it? That might be.
Maybe that's it.
There's others. There's got to be other ones.
But the
Everything on TV Land is a three camera sitcom.
Everything what?
Like any of those shows on TV Land where they take like very old, yeah, those are all three camera, because like single camera sitcom on like the TV Land network would, at least it would look pretty weird right now, you know, in 20 years that's going to be the Nick at Night fodder, is going to be like The Office and whatnot.
Right. Up to about 20 years ago, that was all sitcoms were three camera sitcoms.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the only notable difference or the only notable exception I can think of is Larry Sanders.
Yeah, okay. And that was ahead of its time in so many ways.
So many ways. That was one of the best things ever aired on HBO, period.
Yeah. But so this movie, do you want to describe the plot?
Yeah, so there's a lot of characters. They all speak very quickly, kind of it's sort of like the way that everybody talks in Deadwood, with the constant swearing and just quick back and forth banter. But if you were applying that to, say, like the screwball comedy genre as opposed to the Western genre, and so you have an anti-war general, a bunch of guys and their underlings in British government, and some high ups with the Pentagon in the United States discussing and just sort of like going through the various shenanigans that happened before a vote. In the case of this film, the vote was for a war that resembles the Iraq War in a lot of ways.
Yeah. On the U.S. side, there was also an anti-war U.S. senator and a pro-war. I think he was the assistant secretary of state, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
So you see both on the British side and on the U.S. side, also
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I was getting a little bit of word fatigue just because, like, I watched 3 hours of Oz right before we started this movie. So, in the worst 3 hours of Oz, also known as the last 3 hours of Oz.
But did you say you're going through word fatigue?
Yeah, just like I was having a little bit of trouble like following everything really precisely. I mean, we're also like dealing with the podcast is feeling a little under the weather. Which,
Elizabeth the podcast is not going to make any kind of appearance. So
no, I had to sleep on I mean, basically, I'm living in the living room until we figure out that she doesn't have COVID
or goes through it.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
So I'm just kind of like
hopefully not at all, or at least with at worst with minimal symptoms.
Yeah, hopefully she's like one of those asymptomatic people, I guess.
Wow, this is scary because I've already started hearing I've got like one family member. My cousin's husband has it. I don't know. So my cousin obviously has exposure. I don't know where she's at, which meant that my aunt and uncle were exposed. So they're quarantining themselves at home right now, and they're older. My cousin's husband is on the younger side, but still he was showing symptoms. So I know them. I know now Elizabeth the podcast is under full
under the weather, and she's been sleeping all day today, although she seemed to be feeling a bit better and asked me to give her some TV on an SD card. So
is it again T on an SD card?
Oh, a TV. She put some TV to watch in bed because she's, she can't hang out in the living room now.
Okay. I heard tea on an SD card. Because first, tea, because, somebody's not feeling well, they want some tea. So tea on an SD card, that's pretty impressive.
I pity the fool.
Who tries to deliver, got it.
Pours tea on an SD card. Although actually an SD card, I don't know if that would do anything if you like dried it off before you put it back in the computer. I think honestly you probably could submerge an SD card in water, but but don't quote me on that.
And then just let it dry off, or use a hair dryer, but on
Yeah, because there's like no inside for it to. I mean, like those things are completely sealed shut. You can't take them apart unless you like crack it with a pair of pliers. I mean, it's kind of like a Nintendo DS cartridge. You literally can't take those apart. Which is or like Nintendo Switch cartridges. If there's any kind of issue that's figured out in the future with like, I don't know, some piece of technology was faulty and the data starts getting lost off of those things, then they're totally shot. There's no real way to do anything with them.
So now I keep picturing tea on an SD card, because I'm imagining, so you've got some tea, and then instead of a little biscuit or a pirouette or something like that, you have an SD card just kind of like sitting there soaking a little bit in the tea. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I feel like if Proust now, right? Because you dip that in tea and you eat it, and
then suddenly you have
some kind of memories coming to you
of when you were first introduced to Pokemon or something. Got to be something technologically related. So so then and one of the other main characters is the British. I can't remember if you mentioned the British minister.
Yeah, there's like the British minister who's like the taller, older guy who just runs around screaming at everybody. I mean, granted, like everybody in this movie basically just runs around screaming at everybody else. But there's like him, and then there's like the more or the less senior guy, and then he gets caught in the like resignation shenanigans.
He says that something at the beginning. He misspeaks and he says war is unforeseeable. And
right.
Suddenly he took this really hard line, and it's kind of against what the British government and definitely the U.S. government have been leaning towards, and moving towards war. It sounds like a dovish voice in the government. I can't remember what was he trying to say.
I feel like I experienced this movie as like a lot of really, really good lines just kind of flying over my head, or not over my head, but like I would pick up the lines.
Yeah.
I think I need to watch the whole thing again to figure out exactly what the relationship between everybody was.
This was the issue that I had with what do you call it? The Devil Probably. Because I had a hard time keeping track of the relationships between the people, and I would hear individual sentences or pairs of sentences that were spoken, but all these lines kind of coming at me, but without sort of the coherent which I couldn't quite capture. Oh, that's funny.
And I think this I mean, there were some great lines in this movie. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, like, can we go somewhere where enormous children aren't eating snacks? That was a great one. Let them eat cock. A lot of like very good, like, even if you don't quite understand what's going on, it has a completely different sense of humor than say the Airplane movies, but it's moving at that same rapid clip.
Okay, yeah.
And you can still like extract little bits and pieces.
Well, it felt a little bit like Adam Sorkin, right? Is that like in the
Aaron Sorkin, you mean?
What was that?
Aaron Sorkin?
Aaron Sorkin, thank you. Aaron.
Another guy that started on TV.
All right, this goes back to the Adam Arkin, Alan Arkin, where I said that Adam Arkin was Alan Arkin's younger brother. And so it's Aaron Sorkin. Yeah, not Adam Sorkin. So
yeah, you're talking about like the West Wing Social Network guy.
Yeah.
Oh man, did you ever see the first show he did, Sports Night?
Sports Night. Yep, I watched all of Sports Night, and it's not
it was okay. I gave the DVDs to my mother.
I enjoyed it, even though I'm totally not into sports, and I knew enough about those shows because sometimes they were like, okay, that's the only thing on. So I've seen some of them, even though they meant nothing to me.
Oh yeah, and I feel like that show has like so little to do with sports in any way. I mean, it's fun to see like Benson from Soap be like the head of this giant newsroom.
Yeah.
And he's good at playing like generic daddy figure, whatever.
Right, I forgot about that. I know him more as Benson from Benson.
Oh yeah, see, I've never actually seen an episode of Benson. I've seen all of Soap except for like the last 15 episodes, but I never actually saw an episode of Benson.
And I saw most of Benson before I saw a single episode of Soap. I still haven't seen the last season of Benson. Maybe one day I'll go
someday.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if this quarantine goes on,
yeah, I'll have plenty of time to watch the Benson. I said the Benson movie, the Benson TV show, the last series. Let's see, soap. Well, I guess it's time to go through all the soap. I think I own all the soap on DVD. I might have it in storage, or I might have finally gotten rid of it because I watched several seasons. How many seasons was it total?
It was 4 seasons. 87. Oh, my internet.
Yeah, kind of flaked out.
Okay, so yeah, there's 4 seasons of soap. I believe there's like 80 episodes because they all got pretty standard like network sitcom season orders.
Okay.
I've seen like, actually now that I think about it, I've seen like up to episode 50 or so maybe because I was watching them on my dad found like the Time Life VHS tapes that you used to have to buy off an 800 number on TV. Somebody was selling like a giant stack of them at a garage sale. And so and there's like 4 episodes somewhere in there that I never saw because they were just missing from the stack of tapes.
Oh, okay. I should go into storage and see if I still have them, so you can finally watch those last few episodes.
Yeah, that would be fun. I mean, that seems like a show where it could be pretty enjoyable post Shark Jump.
Yeah, so let's see if that's oh, does it jump the shark?
It's hard to tell, right? Because like the whole point of the show was that it was completely ridiculous from the get-go, but you end up with a point later in the show where like what is it? Corinne is the daughter, and she has like a baby, and it turns out the baby is possessed by the devil, and like aliens show up, and like a lot of the kind of classic, like if you had a bingo card for like has this jump the shark, like you could check off a couple boxes.
Oh, don't like aliens kidnap Billy Crystal or something like that, or no?
Yeah, and then supposedly like the last also like Billy Crystal, like he's gay, but somehow every storyline revolves around him accidentally getting a woman pregnant or something, or like which is kind of ridiculous. And I guess like if soap never got canceled, there's no Golden Girls, so it had to die.
Oh wait, why do you say that?
It's the same woman created both shows.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Susan Harris might have been early. Well, actually, no, because Mary Tyler Moore wasn't the showrunner on Mary Tyler Moore's show, though. I don't think she was just an executive producer.
Who the showrunner for Golden Girls?
Well, I'm just trying to think like who's the earliest female showrunner on a U.S. sitcom in prime time. Susan Harris with soap might be the earliest one I can think of. But then Susan Harris also went on to create the Golden Girls. And she was like one of the people that kind of springboarded off of the Norman Lear shows.
So can you explain what a showrunner is?
So the showrunner is the closest thing in TV production that you would have to a director on a film. So usually the showrunner is pretty much always going to be somebody in the writer's room because TV lives and dies on writing.
Right, the role of the director is very different in TV than it is in a movie.
Yeah, the director in a TV show, once the style for the show has been set, they're pretty interchangeable. The director is pretty much just the person who figures out where is this camera supposed to be at XYZ point, marks up the script, and then sits on set to make sure that the camera is in the place where they wrote it was supposed to be in the notations. And that's why like a lot of like when actors want to branch out to anything behind the camera, the first thing they're usually offered is a directing job on an episode of a TV show. That's like, Diane Keaton directing that episode of Twin Peaks. Steve Buscemi, before he directed any of his features, he directed an episode of Oz and a couple episodes of Sopranos.
Okay.
But yeah, the director on a TV show, pretty much just like the person making sure the camera is doing what it's supposed to. The showrunner is the person who they don't usually write all of the episodes, although in some cases they do write all of the episodes. But at the very least, they're the person who gets final veto power on anything and everything. Because otherwise, if you don't have like one or two people that are ultimately like not coming up with all the ideas, but at least you end up with an incoherent vision, right?
Right.
Like too many
They're providing the vision
kind of deal.
The showrunner provides the vision.
Right. The showrunner is the person who has like the idea in their head of like, this is what this thing is supposed to look like. And that's like an enormous amount of work. And that's usually why the showrunner isn't also the person starring in the show. Although there are examples of that. Perfect example of that is either, you know, it's Gary Shandling's show or Larry Sanders.
What about stuff like the Dick Van Dyke Show or all those shows?
The showrunner on Dick Van Dyke was Carl Reiner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's a good example of where, you know, and Carl Reiner made a bunch of movies, which he was the director. I don't know if he was writer director, but so he goes from showrunner for all this stuff, for all these comedies on TV to director of all these comedy movies.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and so in this case, on like Thick of It and Veep, Armando Iannucci is the showrunner. He's also the guy who's credited as the director on this film, and one of the 4 screenwriters. The 4 screenwriters, I'm guessing, that are credited at the end of this were the writers' room for the Thick of It.
Okay.
I'd have to check that, but it makes sense.
It's a good guess.
Yeah.
It's an educated guess. Yeah, so the movie, I know, what are your thoughts about it?
I thought it was good. I mean, I thought it was most of the joys of the film are in the language. I didn't get the sense of like there weren't any political insights here that I hadn't come to on my own, and I almost feel like the speed and the kind of rapid fire nature and pacing of the entire piece covers up a general lack of or maybe it's not covering up a lack of a larger political vision, because on the other hand, like the entire structure of the thing is sort of so focused on the idea of government as this non-unified force of like flies buzzing around things quickly, and just like a lot of people running around like they were in a Moliere play, just sort of insulting each other.
Wait, so what was your issue with that?
I guess I just didn't get a sense of how does the director and or writer feel about the war?
Okay.
What political principles, if any, does the writer director hold?
Yeah. Okay. This is all. It was. I want to say it was agnostic.
Yeah, like there's, and on the one hand, like sometimes that's good because if you're too close to the subject material, you start losing details and like kind of finer detail. And that was one of my issues with like the HBO show The Wire. Kind of had the exact opposite problem that this had, where it like knew so clearly what it was saying, it kind of suffocates a lot of the characters from developing. But in the case of this, I mean, they kind of start with these like power dynamics between the main characters, and that's sort of where everything, it kind of like the like improv comedy, the like if you the kind of Bible of improv comedy, which is this book called Impro that was written by this guy named Anthony Johnstone in the early 80s. He says that his entire theory of comedy is that comedy is about mismatched power relationships being played out. So like his example in the beginning of the book is that it's funny if the slave goes around and starts beating the master with a newspaper around the stage. People just naturally find that funny because it's subverting the natural power relationship.
Okay.
Endemic to these things, and you see a lot of that in this movie, right? Like the older British guy that's like super skinny, that's like the most wound up out of all of them. When he eventually meets with the guy from the Pentagon, of course the guy from the Pentagon has to dress him down because we've been waiting for that moment the entire movie. And it's
because that's the guy that's been going around dressing everybody else down and swearing at
right. And like if you don't get that moment, then it's like the movie's almost like it would read as a lack of awareness of like, oh, this is what this character is, if you don't have that kind of denouement at some point. Yeah, other than that, I mean, it was
Well, go to extend or to expand on something he said. There was no the director or the director and the writers didn't seem to have they didn't put a stake on the ground. They didn't say, okay, this is what I or what we believe. This is where we stand. Like we see, and we're gonna make fun of that position as well, because we're making fun of everyone and kind of slicing everything open. But here's the position we're taking, and they didn't take one.
Yeah, like now that I'm thinking about it, did you ever see Rules of the Game, Jean Renoir?
No.
Oh, okay. That's one we should watch but has a similar kind of like screwball comedy feel to it. You have a lot of people running around. There's a lot of physical gags. I mean, this had like the one sight gag of like the guy holding the two phones next to his head at the same time.
Right.
I think that was the only, or no, there's the other great sight gag where you have James Gandolfini doing the math on like this like children's calculator that keeps making goofy noises. But Rules of the Game, you have, I guess, a similar focus. You're looking at the powerful people in the society. You're seeing how they're dysfunctional on an interpersonal level, but you also get this like very strong sense of Jean Renoir being kind of disgusted by, I mean, it's another film about the lead up to a major war. In the case of Rules of the Game, it's about the failure of European civil society to stop World War II.
Okay.
In this case, it's just sort of about the resigned inevitability that something like the Iraq War is going to happen. And like, we're at a point where it just seems like this is what elected officials do.
Yeah.
We have no control over them. And the best thing to do would be to just sort of step back and watch it like a horse race. And that was kind of the vibe I got from this.
Was it about the inevitability? Because there were people who were working, and they were also manipulative and using their political machination to get there, but they were opposed to the war. The general Gandolfini and the one of the U.S. senator.
Oh yeah, and they oppose the war, but the thing is, the one guy who's actually going to do something, the guy who's going to resign.
Oh.
His resignation, like the whole scene about his resignation is about the pointlessness and of his resignation and his own kind of powerlessness endemic to his being in a position of power.
Yeah.
And we see the James Gandolfini character who's against the war. He decides not to resign when the war is called because at the end of the day, it's about preserving power.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think also just like this keeps, because there are like, one of the things that's so striking about Rules of the Game, and granted, like comparing, this isn't really fair to In the Loop because you could compare pretty much any movie to like Rules of the Game is as good as people think Citizen Kane is. Like,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, Rules of the Game is like top 3 movies ever made. Purely, if you're gonna like send the space capsule out, it'd be like that, late spring or Tokyo story or something like that. And but there's these periodic moments that resemble a horror film almost. Like there's this sequence where all the socialites are hunting these rabbits. The camera lingers on the dead rabbit, and you're like, something very eerie and weird is going on here, and you're kind of encouraged not to empathize with any of the main characters. They're all very entertaining, but they're all also kind of like scary and the sort of hollowness that they betray through their behavior, actions, and priorities. And in the Loop, I almost feel like there's something kind of seductive about it, right? Like these people are much funnier and more entertaining than most of the people you encounter in real life.
Right.
Even if a lot of their lives involves them, getting embarrassed or whatever, it's exciting and enjoyable. Or like you get the sense of, if I could talk that quickly, this is where I'd want to be with these people. I mean, I don't get the sense that like Iannucci thinks any of these people are good people, but in that sense, you also don't really, there basically isn't a good person in the movie. There's no like
movie
in the Loop, and in the Loop,
yeah.
you don't have any melodramatic balance, right? Because like the essence of melodrama is painting out the specifics of the abstract notions of right and wrong. on.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas farce, I guess farce tends to be more nihilistic because you're just sort of, you don't have those things. But at the same time, given the weight of what's being discussed, there does seem to be this like lack of a counterbalance in the sense of the world being given by the film.
Yeah, there's no good people in this.
No.
There's degrees of bad or degrees of evil. Although evil is too strong a word. I think, or maybe that's okay. I'm going to misuse this, the banality of evil. But like nobody comes off as this sort of like, oh, I'm going, the devil or something like that. But
you have like a lot of people acting very extra because at the end of the day, they know that they don't actually have any power. Their power stems directly from this bureaucratic process that moves with or without them, seemingly in the same direction every time.
I think the closest to the closest to a good person is the one minister who Simon Foster, who's the one who misspeaks, but he's just and is then put in the center of things, and he has no power or any control over what he does. Everything is dictated to by other people.
Oh yeah, and like the only way that anyone else in the film knows how to respond to him, like trying to behave like a human, is to dress him down and make sure that he can't threaten the overall system.
Yeah.
Which I guess is, the rule of like institutions will protect themselves in their own continued existence over, generally speaking, over trying to achieve whatever goals or things they were established to create in the world.
So
that's like a very broad statement, but
that's what.
That's like a very broad, like I'm sure there's plenty of counter examples to that, but if you're just trying to like make sense of politics, that's like, I don't know, it's a yardstick that I usually use to think like, okay, does this make sense or does this not make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I've seen this before, but I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it a second time.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it too. It's a very funny movie.
Yeah, it's funny. It's wry.
Yeah, there's a lot of like bizarre wordplay, a lot of kind of taking cliches and just sort of stretching them out until they break, which I always love. And yeah, that they're just sort of like profane screwball comedy kind of thing, right? Like it happened one night or something, or My Man Godfrey, everybody speaking a mile a minute.
Yeah, this the only thing that this was missing was some hard hitting news journalists was saying, so that's we're gonna go to war. Oh yes, we're gonna go.
Clark Gable would have been very at home here.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that'd be fun to have him in there.
I mean, or like, Bugs Bunny is just like was the Bugs Bunny character was based on Clark Gable, and it happened one night.
Yeah,
right. And like,
I watched a tiny bit of it a few weeks ago. It was, and I forgot just how Clark Gable looks, because he doesn't look as debonair as and I'm saying debonair and dashing. I mean, he's very attractive, but
very attractive, but he looks kind of like greasy almost, right?
Yeah, kind of this greasy, goofy guy, and it's not what it's not quite what my image of him is. And I don't know if that was just if I'm misremembering what or.
Well, I think he's also a lot younger in that. Like you see him in Gone with the Wind, and he's older. He's got the gray hair,
and that's closer to what I think of. That's more of what I think of as Clark Gable, the fast talking, wacky, goofy guy from It Happened One Night. But that's got his big romance with
Claudette Colbert.
Thank you. The reason I saw it was I was trying to explain to someone what a meet cute is, and I ended up
that's the original.
Was it the original meet cute? Yeah. Do you want to explain what a meet cute is? Because I don't want to fumble the.
So it's kind of like a meat puppet, but no. Oh yeah, we should talk about that. Yeah, this movie uses the phrase meat puppets like more than I think anyone who wasn't named Chris or Kurt Kirkwood has ever used those two words in sequence.
Who are they?
Chris and Kurt Kirkwood are the meat puppets.
Oh, okay.
The band, not well, there's like two other people in the band, but the
main
the people who've been in the band from the first Meat Puppets record through to the present are Chris and Kurt Kirkwood.
Wow, you know a a lot about the Meat Puppets.
Oh, I love the Meat Puppets.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Up on the Sun is a great record. Meat Puppets 2 is a great record.
So the only thing I know about the Meat Puppets is in college, a friend of mine showing off. He knew a lot about music, and he had huge CD and tape collection. And he was just showing me some of the stuff. And I remember hearing the Sugar Cubes for the first time. Björk, before she was Björk. Björk.
Life is Too Good.
Björk.
I think it's the record, right? The green one.
I don't remember which album it is. All I remember is a song in which she goes do 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 do. No, that's not it. What am I singing? I'm singing Walk on the Wild Side. Da, da, da. No, I can't remember what the
or wait, no, that's a like rip off of Walk on the Wild Side that was on the radio last summer. Shit was Haim Summer Girl, just like a complete rip off of Walk on the Wild.
Really? Oh, okay. I don't know. But yeah, so he was pulling out all the albums, and one of them was Meat Puppets, and I don't remember the music. I just remember the name, and for I don't know how long I used to, when throwing out a name of a random band, I would always pick, I would always go to Meat Puppet. It was just such a beautiful name.
But yeah, I just remember seeing that in the record store when I was like a teenager and going up to the guy at the counter was like a big shot with the college radio station, so he knew the Meat Puppets pretty well. And I just figured it was like a novelty record because I was like, who would actually perform under the name the Meat Puppet? Half my record collection at that point was Weird Al CDs, so like I think I just assumed that like anything that wasn't a Beatles record was probably novelty music. And yeah, no, they're I'm like a sucker for any kind of like country rock fusion stuff, and they're like at the extreme. They're like the only people I think who ever perfectly got half and half, like hardcore speed metal-y punk mixed with like Louvin Brothers country. And it's just a really bizarre mix. That is definitely an acquired taste because I can't think of anybody where I played the Meat Puppets for them. They're like, whoa, I need to go get these records. That was me. That was just me. But
and I imagine that Meat Puppets with lowercase m, lowercase p are also an acquired taste.
For sure, yeah. Meat puppet. It's just such a like great insult.
Calling someone a meat puppet. Yeah. That I don't know how many times they use that in this movie, referring especially to the weak, kind of ineffective minister.
I just had I slept on the couch last night because quarantine, but I must be getting tired because I just had a thought that like, oh, that's where the word Muppets came from. No, that's not where the word Muppets came from.
Well, you mean that it came from puppet or?
Well, no, Muppets. It's a combination of marionette puppet.
Oh, that makes sense.
Not meat puppet.
Yeah.
Or else, like, I feel like that show would have been a lot different.
Right. I was gonna say Meet the Feebles. The Feebles could have been meat puppet, but no, they're Feebles. So. Since just going back to a previous tangent, just meet cute. You were starting to explain what a meet cute is.
Oh, right. So meet cute. So meet cute is generally speaking in a romantic comedy film. Although any film that has elements of the romantic comedy genre or takes the syntax of romantic comedy films and uses it for whatever purpose, you're probably going to have a meet cute because you can't have the rest of it without the meet cute. The meet cute being some kind of crazy occurrence where the two people who are supposed to fall in love with each other meet, and it should be cute.
It should be cute, yeah.
And I believe the term meet cute was, I think Billy Wilder came up with that.
Oh yeah, yes. I was trying to explain to some folks, to classmates, what a meet cute was, and I found a video of like a compilation of the top 10 meet cute in film history, so which is really neat, and I recommend it just for seeing different people's ideas of what a meet cute is, and just what a wide variety can have, and also just remembering, oh yeah, I remember that, like the whole scene from It Happened One Night.
I just had an idea for a restaurant.
Okay,
it's called Meat, MEAT, Cute, and it's just like a steakhouse, but you draw little faces on the steaks before you send them out.
Oh, that sounds cute. All right, that's $1 million idea right there.
There's gonna be a lot of empty space in the restaurant industry whenever we get out of our houses.
Yeah, we'll have our pickup location. of chefs, waits. Oh, okay. Oh gosh, yeah. There'll be a lot of wait staff and a lot of chefs and cooks and stuff that are going to be looking for stuff. I wonder how many of these businesses are actually totally going to go under. So not just about whether they, how much they rehire people, but if the business is even there to rehire people.
Most small businesses don't have reserves for more than, presuming they're still like paying their general expenses. Yeah, most businesses don't have reserves for more than like 3 months, especially in the restaurant business, because so much of the restaurant business is basically just rolling money over and over again. I'm kind of wondering if the bookstore upstate New York, the bookstore that I used to work for, like if they're gonna make it out of this, or if they're still gonna have, because their rent was like not optimal.
Really?
Yeah, and if they're just like outright closed for 5-6 months, that might be it.
I wonder what's it going to mean? What's it all going to mean here in terms of future rent prices? Are the rent prices going to be depressed because they suddenly people can't afford? They could hardly afford the rents before, and now they definitely can't afford them at all.
Yeah, it's going to drop rent. If the economy does ever come back, then wages are going to go up because there's just like what Marx called the surplus labor army is diminished vastly. That's like a lot of that's why there's such a huge push for everybody to go to college, because the more unnecessary college degrees there are, the more it pushes down the price of like high cost labor, so like software engineers and people like that. The more of them there are, the more you end up saving long term. And so the whole idea of like, oh, everybody goes to college and studies to get a middle class job, that's a bunch of bullshit, because at the end of the day you still need other people in the other jobs, or else the society doesn't work.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. You can't just.
It's pretty much just a way to drive down wages in the high cost sectors. And that was incredibly successful in the software industry. Those people are not making anywhere near the kind of money they were making like 10-15 years ago.
No.
At least I don't think so. I'm walking dogs, so like I don't have.
No, people in tech, there's there are so many open positions. There the getting more people in the industry may drive wages down, because if there's a plethora, if there's a glut of available software engineers who can do the job. But there isn't. That's part of the problem, is the shortage, at least in some cities. Is there are more jobs than people to do it, or more than people who can do it.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, like, there's going to be a lot of things very different whenever we get out of this.
I don't know. Are we going to end up kind of, after a few months, bouncing back into the swing of things? Or has there been radical transformations? Or, there's going to be it'll have some impact, but it's not going to fundamentally change things, but it might.
It's hard to say, because, we were on the verge of a recession anyway. The biggest issue, I think, this time versus 2008 is that the Fed can't do, like, the Fed's trying to do the things that they did to stimulate the economy in 2008. And some of those things are just like handing a bunch of money to corporations. That never helps anything, although it makes the stock market look marginally better for a couple weeks or months. But like lowering the interest rate, which is the main the interest rate has been the primary control lever for economic problems in this country, and I don't think that lever is going to work this time. But
why do you say that?
Because the lowering the interest rate, it can spur activity. The activity still has to be based on the idea that there's like a solid base of activity and the market is just sort of going up and down. Ergo, there's the possibility to make money in the future. If enough infrastructure collapses, then that isn't really, it's not the safe kind of investment that it may have been before all of this.
But so you're predicting an infrastructure collapse, not just a temporary.
Well, we're going to have like parts of the infrastructure, like the hospitals are going to collapse. That's basically a foregone conclusion at this point, because steps have not been taken to stop that from happening. And in fact, the steps that have been taken have exacerbated the crisis. crisis. So you're going to end up with short-staffed hospitals without enough beds, without enough stuff. You're probably going to end up with, like, if medical workers aren't given adequate gear and they're just faced with their own possible death every day, you could see strikes from hospital workers. We're already seeing strikes from the people that are doing all the like Instacart workers. They're all going on strike starting tomorrow.
Oh, are they really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what are their demands?
Proper safety gear. It's gotten to the point where the things that people are going to be striking about are going to be so obvious, and pressing that it's going to be really hard to whip up a propaganda shitstorm to stop the momentum on those things.
I didn't realize that Instacart employees were striking.
Mm-hmm.
Good for them.
Yeah, they're all going on strike tomorrow because also, like, Instacart, they do that shitty thing where they pull all the tips together. So, like, you could do the best job ever, and no matter what, it basically averages out your pay to $15 an hour, which is not. That does not include the gas for your car, which you're paying for yourself.
Okay.
So, really, your actual take home with Instacart, like, maybe in the last couple of weeks, it would have gone up to like $25 an hour for like brief periods of time, but by and large, you're making about $10 an hour,
mm-hmm.
and you also have to maintain and upkeep a car or car insurance, etc. So it's and they also the Instacart management was saying was telling their shoppers to so that the
wait back up. I lost you.
So they here I'm gonna move over right next to the router. We'll see if that makes a difference.
Okay.
So the Instacart management was basically instructing the employees to switch things out, like items out with cheaper items when possible, so that Instacart would essentially pocket the difference. We saw that we ordered a bunch of stuff from the grocery store delivery because, we had to. And we ended up with, like, we ordered, I think, a pound of ground turkey, and we got like half a pound of ground turkey that had like a sticker saying like sell by tomorrow.
No, jeez.
And they charge the same.
Uh-huh.
They also charge all those delivery fees, which don't actually go to the drivers.
I didn't realize that.
I mean, it's like every one of those platforming companies. It's scummy rent-seeking behavior with an app in front of it. They all want to act like Uber if they can get away with it. But the thing is if the shoppers all decide I'm not going to show up and do this tomorrow, then everybody's going to be angry at Instacart because the shoppers, there's no specific place for them to be angry at the shoppers because they're so diffuse.
Uh-huh.
Hopefully. I mean, Americans have always been very good at figuring out ways to be angry at the people who want to help them, but hopefully that's not what happens here.
Yeah. I wonder if people will be like, they should have all the protective gear, even if for selfish reasons. They want the
because it compromises your groceries.
Right.
Same thing as like if the people if the medical professionals, if they go on strike for protective gear, yes, some people are going to die, but if they don't do that, then the doctors are going to die. Then you got a really big fucking problem.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I had an acquaintance who works at one of the hospitals, at one of the main hospitals here, said that they had something like forget what the number was. It was something like 70 patients who've tested positive for COVID, and 80 healthcare staff that have tested positive, something like that. So I don't know what the exact numbers are. I don't know how well in tune she was. This is what she was telling us.
That only gets worse if you have because you heard the federal government, they're basically they're outbidding the states to get medical gear so they can stockpile it. The governor of Michigan was saying like they keep ordering these ventilators and masks. The order is about to show up, and then the federal government is diverting it so that it doesn't go to their state.
You mean that woman in Michigan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, this entire thing has shown that there's no legitimacy to most of our society and how it operates. I think, there's very,
Yeah, that's really upsetting about the federal government jumping in like that. First, forcing the states to do that, forcing the states to bid against each other.
Well, that's because the companies, they want to jack up the prices.
Yeah.
That's why, like, Trump has refused to instate a national production order, right? Because, like, the government, if there's a massive crisis, and this is what happened during World War II, et cetera, they can just seize factories basically and say, you're going to be making this from now on.
Right.
And they've chosen not to do that because it would drop the prices of these things, and they still think there's money to be made on masks and ventilators.
Although then there was also the deal that I forget what, I think, was it FEMA that was going to pay something like $1 billion for ventilators through that GM was going to make, and then they backed out because they thought that might be it might be too expensive. But
they're like they're all hedging their bets on making money. Meanwhile, there's a giant crisis going. I mean, they literally were trying to tell everybody go back to work for the sake of the stock market.
Yeah.
Repeatedly, and like thankfully the news media has a lot of people who are not very bright in it, but they finally caught on. Oh, okay, these people don't have our interests in mind and kind of actively want to see us die.
Yep.
And they're saying that outright now. Thank God. I mean, if they'd said it 10 years ago, maybe this wouldn't have turned into the giant issue that it is now, but at least they're coming to their senses finally. Because, like, I mean, that's what they should have been saying about, like, the Iraq War and all that. I don't know. I'm like,
it's reversed now. Which generation is supposed to sacrifice? Is supposed to make the life or death sacrifice. Now it's who should live or die, and the response is like, okay, boomer.
Right. It's like,
you think maybe Republicans are taking that position about the older generation should sacrifice themselves to the younger generation as a way?
I mean, yeah, there's
as a way of appealing to the youth vote.
I didn't even think about that. But,
I'm talking about cynical.
Yeah, nothing they're doing. I mean, it makes sense insofar as all behavior of people in power within the United States is structured to incentivize short-term decision-making over long-term priorities.
Yeah.
So the people that die off probably going to be disproportionately people who watched Fox News because they didn't get proper information in time, and continue to get wrong information, and we're continuing to gather in places like, you're hearing about these mega churches that refuse to shut down. I doubt there's a lot of Democrats going to the mega church.
Yeah. Liberty University is reopening, right? I
mean, so if we want to take Liberty, the Jerry Falwell place, and everybody in the town where that university is about ready to, like, fucking burn Falwell's house down or something, because they're like, we don't want people that have been traveling around the country all showing up and exposing us to diseases.
Right.
And I think, like, if the mayor of the town says, like, you can't do this, like, Falwell doesn't have, I mean, he has money, so he has some kind of recourse, but I don't think it's going to be an enormously bad
how much weight
disaster.
How much weight does he have? I mean, does the town pretty much survive? Does it exist because the university is there? Because then he has a lot of question. What was that?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm going to find the article that I was reading. I might still have it open in here.
Because I know when I went to college, it was a university town, and even though there was some stuff, there was some business outside of the university. The school and the president of the university had a lot of influence in local politics because they had 100,000 students living there, shopping there, eating there, paying rent there.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, like, a lot of college towns, this is going to be, someplace like Williamstown, Massachusetts. They're fucked, because the entire town is just the university.
Which
There's like, Williams College.
Oh, okay. All right.
I mean, they're not really that fucked because the college has an enormous endowment. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of college. Athens, Georgia, 90 or not 90%, but like Athens, Georgia, most of the economy does revolve around the fact that you have the main University of Georgia campus there. Any of these college towns are going to have a pretty rough time of it because every single business that relies on including like Saratoga, New York, you're going to have a lot of issues because a lot of money that does come through the town is tourism. So Saratoga, New York, the reason why I'm bringing up Saratoga, New York specifically for our listeners is it's where I grew up. So I know the economy and the details on a much more minute level than I do, towns that I didn't spend 22 years in. So I'm going to use it as a microcosm, but 90% of the economy in Saratoga Springs, New York, revolves around two things. One, Skidmore College being open and a bunch of Skidmore kids showing up and frequenting local businesses and the university hiring a bunch of people. Number two, there's a racetrack that's open for a month and a half every summer. If the racetrack doesn't open, everything in the city basically would probably go out of business. Maybe not absolutely everything, but like it would go magically from being this like boom town to going back to what it was like in the 1970s when there was just like a shoe store and like a grocery store on the main street and a bunch of abandoned buildings.
Yeah, everything else is going to get shuttered.
Yeah, and that creates, and the thing is, if the stimulus bill only hands a bunch of money to these giant corporations, then all that infrastructure is just sort of left to collapse. I don't think anyone running a small business can maintain payroll or basic expenses like rent off of a $1,200 stipend.
But there's the small business loans too in the bill.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
I talked to another friend of mine and I asked her about that because she runs a small business.
I mean, the other thing is if it's a loan, then that means you're going to have to make up the lost income at some point in a depressed economy.
So my understanding is that there is at least some of the loans, if the business doesn't lay people off, then or mostly keeps their workforce, I don't know what mostly is, then the loans will actually be forgiven.
Huh. Okay, that's good. That's what I thought was in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I got the impression that was one of the last minute changes.
And that kind of makes sense because they probably want to, because if they can give stimulus money through payroll, then that stops some of the massive health insurance problem because most people are on employer insurance. So like that's the one tactical argument for trying to give the stimulus money through payroll versus just directly sending everybody a check.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm not sure. That's all from reading all the frantic news articles that had come out as the bill was changing, as the negotiations or the fight over the content was going on. So I think that was my understanding from the final bits. But that's just the highlights. That's just the highlights in some articles. But so when I asked my friend about it, when I asked her about the loans, that was before. I think before that was actually the provision that they'd be forgiven if they kept people on.
Right.
But it's still, I don't know that it was a huge amount. I have no idea if that was if it's a lot of money or not that's being, that the loans themselves, if they're substantial enough. I don't know. I didn't even know that 3 months was the rule.
I mean, that's not like a hard and fast rule. That's just sort of like, generally you don't want to go into business unless you have enough money to float for a year. But the presumption with that is that you're probably not going to be profitable for at least a year. So a lot of that money is going to get eaten through. So presuming that a person who's been in business for 3 years still has that year buffer laying around, probably not the case.
Right.
Because like restaurants, if a restaurant becomes actually profitable within a year, that's like impressive because there's so much upfront cost.
Yeah.
And you're also just like bleeding a lot of stuff out in terms of like constantly re-upping supplies and payroll and whatnot.
A friend of mine was opening a restaurant. The restaurant was supposed to open probably around this week. It was supposed to be sometime in March, towards the end of March. So that's not happening.
Yeah, unless they want to do a lot of delivery. I mean, Chuck E. Cheese is delivering.
Are you serious?
This is not close yet. $20 for 2 large pizzas, and you get 800 tickets for the arcade, which you can't use because you can't go into the arcade because it's a pandemic. Although I think the tickets thing is a pretty smart idea on their part because it's sort of an incentive. Like after this is over,
Yeah, totally.
back to Chuck E. Cheese, except for like whatever spite you feel after digesting Chuck E. Cheese pizza, which could be substantial.
Have you checked? Does Chuck E. Cheese deliver to you?
I'm not close enough to one, but my friend in Texas was telling me that he's close enough because he was looking through like was it Menu Cart or whatever, one of those websites, and it was like, yeah, he saw there was a coupon for 2 large delivered cheese pizzas from Chuck E. Cheese.
You know, you used to live not too far from a Chuck E. Cheese. You used to be a 10-minute drive. Where you live now? There's a Chuck E. Cheese about a 15-minute drive from there.
There is maybe
that went. No, oh, they used to be. That went away.
Oh, they're out of business now.
Yeah.
When I was in Brooklyn, I was pretty close to the. I mean, I wasn't like super close, but there's a Chuck E. Cheese for whatever reason that's still near the Barclays Center, also known as Atlantic Avenue, Pacific Street.
I can't believe it still exists.
I don't.
It feels like a bad childhood dream.
Like why animatronic animals as a
and it's that bad childhood dream that kind of sticks with you. So every so often it'll just kind of out of the blue come out. It's like, oh my god, the horror, and you experienced it firsthand. Because even though it was a dream or a nightmare, you know, you were there, you were experiencing it.
Did you ever see the Rockefeller explosion movie?
No.
Okay, so there's this documentary about because like you know before Chuck E. Cheese is kind of like the restaurant that was left after the animatronic animal wars settled and kind of concluded. But the first restaurant to do the like, here's singing animals, here's crappy pizza, and here's a couple skee ball machines thing was called Showbiz Pizza.
Oh, well, yeah, okay, go on.
And the band was called the Rockefeller Explosion. Or I'm making big air quotes right now for those of you listening.
Around the word band.
Yeah. And there was a documentary about like the last remaining hardcore obsessive fans of the Rockefeller Explosion. I think it's just called Rockefeller Explosion, the movie. And it's one of the most bizarre documentaries. It's Cane Toad's level weird. There's like this guy who's 60 years old. He bought a bunch of the animals from Showbiz Pizza when they went out of business. And recreated the inside of a Showbiz Pizza in this barn in his backyard. And he doesn't have a wife or any children, but he just like invites children from the community to have their birthday parties in this like barn in his backyard. It's like,
okay.
Yeah, I feel like we'd have a lot to talk about with that movie.
Yeah, interesting. Oh, I'm really curious to see that now.
But it's a great documentary. Yeah, it's like up there, like Cane Toads. And do you ever see Guys and Dolls?
Yep.
The not the musical, the like BBC documentary about the old men that live with like $6,000 realistic sex dolls.
No, I have not. Oh wait, maybe I have seen that.
It has like maybe my favorite finishing shot of like any documentary. Like the guy gets a date with a real woman and he's like, I need to introduce you to the important people in my life. And she walks into this like tea party set up with these 3 like very politely dressed sex dolls.
How does she respond?
She just has this look like, and then it cuts to the credits and it says that was their only date
with a live person. I mean, he's gone. Well, I don't know what they're.
Well, that was the guy and the woman that he was trying to go on the date with. That was the only time they ever went out because, you know, I mean, it's kind of creepy walking in on like a kids tea party with 3 sex dolls.
Yeah.
But it makes for great TV.
Yeah. Oh, I totally want to see that.
It should be free on YouTube somewhere.
But yeah, I just realized
Guys and Dolls or something.
What was that?
Let me find it.
But I just realized, you know, we watched a movie called In the Loop. That
oh, that's true.
Yeah, I think we last mentioned about half an hour ago. Well, I don't know. You found it enjoyable, right?
Yeah, I found it enjoyable. I mean, I guess there wasn't a whole lot to say about it, or at least I couldn't think of a whole lot to say about it. Okay, here it is.
found Guys and Dolls?
Yeah, it's like broken into 5 parts, but
Okay.
let me see if I can find it. But I mean, I love those like super trashy BBC documentaries. Because there's a lot of those. Like there's one I've had sex with what is it called? It's called like I've had sex with like 1,800 men or something, and they're just like everything seems so prim and proper, but because of the British accents. But it's
yeah. Right, we think, oh, BBC production, that's going to be prim and proper, and it's okay. Oh, and thank you. You just sent me. You just sent me in chat. Okay.
You just have to sign in because there's an age lock on it. Thank God.
Okay. Dan just sent me the link to the Guys and Dolls movie. So, we didn't mention because we're under the COVID-19 stay-at-home directive. Dan and I are in separate places. We're in two Anomaly podcast recording studios. Two Anomaly studios, the Jamaica Plain one and the Cambridge one. So we're actually video conferencing right now. So, but anyways,
yeah, we're making it happen.
We're making it happen. We're here for you. We're here for you doing so. We won't let a crisis, a pandemic, the end of the world get in the way of recording this podcast, because there are movies to be seen and there are tangents.
We're an essential service.
We're an essential service.
Unlike GameStop.
Where else are you going to get your tangents? So tangents. So the movie. There's not that much to say about it. I thought there'd be more to say about it, but it's like, yeah, okay, it's satire about politics in the UK and politics in the US, and and it's satirizing a little bit of the lead up, or a little bit. It's satirizing the lead up to the Iraq War, kinda. Not that's just it. It's not very strong. It doesn't do it very strongly. Sort of.
It's like the war is almost an after. It's like if you had Dr. Strangelove without the bomb dropping at the end. It's just a bunch of like very eccentric people acting goofy.
Yeah. We don't get any sense of like, okay, so it's going to pass now. The big thing is that the one guy's gonna have to resign, and the other guy, and all the different people, like what are their new roles going to be now that there's been a shakeup as a result of this. But no sense that there's a war coming. It was all about what goes behind the scenes without any feel for what's happening, like what the rest of the world.
It was like insular and incestuous the way that the actual thing probably feels.
Yeah. It was quite possibly very realistic. It just as filmmaking, it missed some. It's missing something.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like that whole gaffe that Boris Johnson had, where he like calls all the doctors on the phone to figure out the plan for what to do about COVID, and he calls the plan Operation Last Gasp. Like that seems like that could have been taken straight out of this movie.
Is that what he called it?
He actually called it Operation Last Gasp.
Oh,
let me find the article. Yeah, it's like. It's bad.
Nobody's still using that name, are they?
I think he was making a joke.
Oh, okay.
But, just not a good one. Oh, yeah, Boris Johnson jokes with CEOs that ventilator crisis should be called Operation Last Gasp.
Wow. The level of insensitivity. I mean, it's one thing if I make that joke. It's another thing if Boris Johnson makes that joke. I make that joke. It's bad taste. But I'm also, I'm down here.
Right. Like you're not the person in charge of the ventilators.
Right.
Your only responsibility right now is to stay home and watch movies, which I feel like you and I have been preparing for this moment in a way that certainly the UK government has not.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been waiting for this moment my whole life. I have not left the apartment in 3 days. And I've watched so many movies, and I finally have a legitimate reason for doing this. An external reason, rather, not legitimate, an external reason for doing this. So like, hey, this is me normally.
Yeah. Oh, actually, this is kind of a tangent, but I still kind of want to talk about it. So I finished watching all of HBO's Oz earlier, and the finale was like one of the worst pieces of television I've ever seen in my life.
Why?
Like,
I'd almost say like people, I'd actually almost recommend that people watch it just because it's like it's hard to believe it could be this bad. So, I mean, it goes full soap opera for the last year and a half, probably last 2 years. Pretty much everything from like the point when Adebisi gets shanked, or a spoiler alert for like 5 minutes ago. Everything after that.
Just to be clear, you're talking about Oz, the movie about prison, not
the TV show about prison. Yeah, not
the
Wizard of Oz. No, not the Judy Garland thing,
or the first Volk Return to Oz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the last episode, and again, massive spoilers, but it's also not really spoiling anything that if you actually make it this far in the show, you will not care about any of these people. So there's sort of very low stakes spoilers, and none of this is going to have to do with any of the parts of the show that are good, because the show is actually very, very good for like 4 years, and then it just sort of.
So you're saying you encourage people to watch the last episode. You mean people who have been watching the show? You're saying make it all the way to the end, or are you saying even people who haven't watched the show, they should just go ahead and watch that last episode?
If you're a fan of like TV train wrecks, so
okay,
I put it in like the same kind of category as did you ever see that show Till Death?
I don't think so.
Nobody did.
Okay.
But it got picked up by I think it was, I only saw it because like somebody at the Onion AV Club like caught it in the middle of the night and wrote an article about like, what the fuck is this?
Mm-hmm.
It's a sitcom, very generic sitcom. It was picked up around the time when a lot of networks, if they had like a reliable star in a sitcom, they would produce or they would commission 10 episodes. If those 10 episodes got decent enough ratings, they would commission another 90 episodes.
Okay.
Because then it's guaranteed syndication.
Right.
And that's like the Charlie Sheen sitcom Anger Management. That's why there's 100 episodes of that. But anyway, so Till Death, they get stuck with this. After a year, nobody wants to watch this thing. It's got like, what's his face? The brother from Everybody Loves Raymond.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait, maybe I did see this.
And the last season, they have one of the characters starts going to a therapist claiming that he's hearing a laugh track and has become self-aware that he's on a sitcom. And then he goes home and everyone else on the show either is unaware that they're on a sitcom or starts gaslighting him. And this guy slowly goes insane. And that's the plot line that the show goes out on when it was being aired at like 11:30 at night on a Wednesday on like the ABC Family Channel or whatever.
Is that the last episode, or is that a story arc?
It's the entire last season. It's like a story arc.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I didn't watch the whole season, but like I watched a couple episodes. I'm like, whoa, this is like if you like digitally altered the footage of Fonzie jumping the shark and replaced his head with Samuel Beckett's. Like it's weird shit. But anyway, so the finale of Oz is on, or like the finale of Alf, where they think they're going to get renewed. They don't. So the implication is just that Alf is being dissected in Area 51. And as you're kind of living with this implication, you just see these like very sentimental stills of the family hanging out with Alf. And so the Oz finale, you have this terrible storyline earlier in the season of this guy who's literally the physical incarnation of the devil. And they finally end that storyline. And in the last episode, they just introduce his mother as yet again another physical manifestation of the devil and then drop the whole storyline. Like they're introducing like 5 or 6 new storylines in this finale for no reason. They're still introducing prisoners. There's this like one correctional officer who was like gonna become he was like apparently really good at basketball, and he gets like his tendon cut by prisoners, and there's this famous basketball player that was incarcerated in the prison, and he gets out, and then the correctional officer goes from being this like pretty reasonable guy to just going full Mark David Chapman in the space of 2 minutes. And he just goes to this guy's basketball game and shoots him. And oh god, what
But are these like, was that a new thing, or that came out of an existing storyline?
There was an existing storyline, but both characters in the storyline behaved like they were completely different people than were established prior in the show.
But so this isn't like The Sopranos, which went out it was on a controversial note, but
well, the Sopranos finale is like brilliant because it leaves enough ambiguity where it's like this can mean a lot of different things. A lot of the things it could mean are very substantial, but it's not hand-holding. This is kind of like if you took like 2 seasons worth of plot lines that weren't any good and decided we need to cram all of these into an hour and a half.
That's quite a feat.
Instead of using it as an opportunity to edit.
Yeah, wow. Okay, I could see why you think everybody should see this. At least everyone who loves
it's fascinating, yeah. Especially because HBO has had a pretty spotty history with like show finales, I feel. Because like the finale to The Wire was decent. It did what it needed to do. I don't think it was like the only genuinely great HBO finale I can think of is the Sopranos finale. I mean, granted, that's like maybe the best final episode of any show ever, but
I forget, was Breaking Bad HBO?
No, that was a AMC.
AMC, okay.
And I didn't really like the final episode of Breaking Bad that much.
Oh yeah, I think you talked about that. It might have been on the best the favorite TV shows episode in which you
whined a lot about Breaking Bad.
Whined a lot. There we go. No, and in analyzing it.
And supposedly the Game of Thrones, I mean, I haven't watched Game of Thrones, but supposedly the last episode of that is like one of the most disappointing hours of television ever.
I heard a lot of people not being unhappy with it. I mean, they're all wondering like what's going to happen. That whole season was just like, what the hell? It's like some of it was like, wow, oh my God, that's amazing. And then it's like, okay, what the hell is going on now? Okay, they're really trying to wrap things up, and what the hell are they doing? And trying to fit all the, make all this stuff kind of fit. But I didn't watch it. That's all. That's all from hearing people's responses to it and reading articles about it. I read all about how Arya was the one who killed the the demon guy that was in charge of the what are they called? Snow Walkers or whatever.
I saw the pilot after I smoked a dab, and that's all of Game of Thrones I've ever seen.
After you smoked a what?
A dab.
What's that?
Like concentrated marijuana. So like, like cocaine to crack. Crack is like concentrated cocaine. Dabs are like marijuana that's concentrated. It's not the same process, but it's the best metaphor I can come up with.
Okay. But so you smoke. How does that go? You smoke it. You light it up on a spoon.
Like it looks like glass. If you like see a lot of it, like you're unless you're like dealing drugs, you're not going to see a whole sheet of it, but it looks kind of like crystal meth when you first get your hands on it. And then you have to like heat it up on a spike. Like it's way more high maintenance than normal weed, but it's 10 times as strong.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Wait, so you did that and then watched the pilot, the Game of Thrones pilot?
Yeah, and there's a short guy and I think a dragon, and that's all I remember.
There's a short guy, but let's see, do we actually see the dragon?
I may have imagined the dragon.
I don't remember when we actually first see there's little tiny baby dragons. I don't remember when we even see those though. I think that's later in the first season. I only watched the first season and a half. It got to be the violence, and especially the sexual violence, was just too much. Plus there was nobody in there, as far as I'm concerned, there's nobody in there who was a good person. They're all different degrees of bad, different degrees of evil. Jon Snow isn't much better than everyone else there. He also goes around killing people.
I think when it first came out too, I think the only 2 shows I was watching first run at that point were Community and 30 Rock.
Oh, both good choices.
Yeah, and I remember a lot of people in college were like, whoa, you have to see this, it's so good. But I'd also found like all the Gary Shandling stuff at the library, and I was just binging it all. And I mean, I would have a hard time believing that Game of Thrones is actually better than like the Gary Shandling shows.
No, but it doesn't mean that it's not an either or. It's not.
Oh yeah, no, it's just like I feel like I spent my time correctly.
Oh, okay. Yes. I think
Um,
between, yeah, if you're, since you've made a choice, I was going to say if you were to make a choice, but you actually made one. So since you've made a choice, I would say that you made the right choice.
This is the theme to Game of Thrones. This is the theme to Game of Thrones. This is the music that you hear.
When you watch dragons fly, and then Peter Dinklage shows up. So, In the Loop. What more is there to say about it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for like a funny movie that's
it's entertaining.
Yeah, it's entertaining. It's it certainly doesn't insult one's intelligence.
Nope. But don't expect to come back with your mind with a whole new way of looking at things.
The Lazy Man's film review. This is not quite as good as Jean Renoir's Rules of the Game or Citizen Kane.
This is somewhere between Citizen Kane and Plan 9 from Outer Space.
This is better than being diagnosed with cancer, but not quite as good as winning the lottery.
Oh, then you got the situation which you were diagnosed with cancer on the same day that you win the lottery.
And that's the Oz finale. That's the vibe.
Oh, okay.
If you can imagine that for an hour and a half.
Uh-huh.
That's pretty much.
Oh, now I want to see this because I like this vibe.
Oh, yeah.
I like the
lottery
winning vibe.
Like post Shark Jump, but not in the finale. They had an entire storyline where there's that older guy where like every once in a while he thinks that God tells him something, right? Rebadow, and God tells him the winning lotto numbers, and he wins the lottery.
Oh, all right. So his faith is confirmed.
I get, but then the CEO that buys the ticket for him like runs off with the money, and he's a basketball guy, and then it's like dragged out for a long time. But like it's so obvious from the first scene of that, like, oh, this like old man who's clearly crazy in the prison is gonna win the lottery because and then question mark profit, right?
Yeah. Well, there's you mentioned that there's the living embodiment of the devil
twice.
So it only makes sense that God would be speaking to someone as well.
And also there's like a preacher guy who gets bricked into a wall not once but twice.
Oh wait, is that the
there's also in this, you should watch the second to last episode too, just because like all these guys have been dealing heroin in prison for like the entire length of the show. Suddenly this dude in like a blazer that looks kind of like what's his face from Jane's Addiction shows up with quote the world's greatest weed brownies, and like suddenly takes over the entire drug trade for 15 minutes with these pot brownies, and then they just like kill him off 15 minutes after they introduce him to the show. And like the effect they use for the weed brownie effects on like the prisoner is just fucking hilarious. It's so ridiculous.
Is it the teetotaler's version of what a drug experience is like?
Kind of. Well, another post shark jumping storyline is this guy gives somebody too much LSD, which causes brain death, and gets sent to solitary. I don't think that because like Robert Hunter did 35,000 hits of LSD by accident once, and I think he's dead now, but like he was fine for the next 30-something years.
Oh, okay.
The guy who wrote all the lyrics for the Grateful Dead.
Was that enough to keep him tripping for the rest of his life?
Well, the thing is, like the way your body works, he was not tripping within about 24 hours.
Okay, it's just.
And then if he tried to take LSD again, probably within the next 6 months, it would have done nothing.
Did he enjoy the trip?
Supposedly, I have to look up the story.
No, it doesn't matter right now. We've got it for another time. Yeah, I think we've talked more about Oz. I mean, definitely about everything, and even about Oz than we have about In the Loop. I think that says something about the movie because there wasn't much there. It wasn't provocative. That's it. It wasn't provocative. That's missing.
Yeah, you're like watching a lot of people who are very good at what they do, doing what they do well, but there's not a lot to. Yeah, like everything's in the right place. It works at what it wants to achieve, and that doesn't leave a lot to talk about in a podcast.
Right. But that's not to say, oh, it's the perfect movie. It's got everything in place and it did everything. It's like, yeah, it did everything it wanted to achieve, which wasn't much.
Yeah, it's like we can stamp it and let it leave the factory. It's past the quality check, but it's not.
Right. Yeah. And it's not that it was lazy or anything or just kind of meh. It was like, yeah, yeah, like you said, it was funny. It was entertaining.
Yeah, it's like an hour and a half episode of some
And
kind of like very vulgar British sitcom, which is exactly what it was.
Right. Or what I was seeing was a funny combination of Veep and The Office.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not quite as much laugh out loud kind of stuff in it.
Yeah, I mean, I laughed out loud a couple times.
Yeah. So yeah, but that was sort of the sense of it. And how much can you? Well, I want to say how much can you talk about? How much can you talk about those? You could talk about Veep and The Office endlessly. You can talk about any of the Aaron Sorkin things endlessly. You know, people still talk.
Well, Sorkin, I think, is a more interesting because, like, Sorkin, I think his beliefs are kind of stupid, but he clearly believes in certain things.
Yeah.
So there's something more tangible to like grab onto.
Yeah, people talk about their with religious fervor. They talk about the West Wing, right?
Yeah, like the West Wing. I mean, I think the whole idea of like portraying he has this faith in professionalism that seems very dangerous given the size of the megaphone he's been handed by fate. But
but what he does is more provocative than what this did.
Yeah, because he is actually he's making an argument. This movie wasn't really making an argument.
Right. It was just entertainment. Cool. All right.
So I guess that's the show.
Yeah, I feel bad that Elizabeth the podcast couldn't make the appearance. She usually makes an appearance, comes by, says hi for a bit. It was great to actually have her as a full-on pod, visiting pod host. Was it last time? Yeah, last time.
Hopefully it's something different, and she'll be back up and at 'em in a couple days.
Yeah, I really hope she doesn't have COVID, or if so, it's mild. And that also that same thing. You and I forget what's.
Carlin.
Carlin? Yeah. The podmate.
The podmate.
Yeah. I hope you guys are also keep safe. So I'm glad you're doing that full on quarantine now.
Yeah. I'm just kind of like, I mean, I'm living in the living room now, I guess.
It could be worse. You could be living in the bedroom. I don't know which is.
Right. That's true. Yeah, because like, one of them's a lot more comfortable to sleep in. The other one has like a lot of things to keep me busy.
Yeah, you're in the one that has all your stuff.
It's true.
And it's two roomfuls of stuff. And you get the kitchen. Oh man.
Yeah, cool. Things could be a lot worse.
They could. This is
that's my review of in the loop.
Things could be a lot worse.
Things could be a lot worse. This is
There we go. So, all right, cool. Well, I guess that's it for this episode.
Yeah, definitely. All right. This has been Dan.
And this has been Ron.
And this has been a nominee episode 30.
38.
I'm gonna have to start scratching them into the wall like prison style.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna pass the quarantine.
So you can say for everyone, you scratch one line in the wall.
Yeah, just get some.
The wall is completely covered. Then you need to get a new apartment just to have more scratching space. So cool. All right. Well, so this has been us.
Yes.
All right. Take care and stay healthy, everyone.
Yeah. Stay inside. Keep watching movies.
Yeah. All right. Bye.